Mike Griffith here of SEC Country, reporting live from Kingsport Meadowview Conference Center, where Jeremy Pruitt and Phillip Fulmer just finished up not too long ago. Rick Barnes also. And some news for Tennessee football as Darrin Kirkland Jr. on Twitter announces he's planning on transferring away from the program. Darrin Kirkland, of course, was a preseason All-SEC pick last year, but never got on the field, re-injured his knee in the weeks leading up to the opener. Very disappointing injury for Tennessee last season. I remember Bob Shoop telling us during the offseason last year that the most important player on the team, on the defense, was Darrin Kirkland Jr., the guy they could least afford to lose. And they lost Darrin Kirkland Jr. before last season. And now Darrin Kirkland Jr. announcing on Twitter that he does plan to transfer out. Now, Jeremy Pruitt did not address that directly. However, he did go on stage here at the Big Orange Caravan stop just minutes after the Kirkland Jr. tweet appeared. We watched as the sports information football assistant Zach Stipe talked with Coach Pruitt, showed him the tweet. Pruitt didn't show any sort of reaction, didn't seem to have any certain look on his face. We couldn't really surmise anything from that. But when he went on the stage, he was asked about leadership from one of the fans in the audience. And that was when Coach Pruitt made the remark, something to the effect of, there's a lot of guys nervous that they're not going to play. And he also said they were nervous because of the unknowns, and that he didn't care how much football anybody had played or where they were from. He was going to play whoever was best that day. There's a story up on seccountry.com right now about that. Two stories up. There's a story about Kirkland Jr.'s tweet. You can read about that and see what he said in his tweet. And you can also read about what Jeremy Pruitt said during the Big Orange Caravan stop here in Kingsport, Tennessee. If you have trouble finding seccountry.com, you can go on Twitter. My handle is @MikeGriffith32 if you want to check it out. The links are posted there. So Darrin Kirkland Jr. announcing that he plans to transfer from Tennessee, a guy had 2 years of eligibility remaining, and a player that I think most of us projected would start in the middle next to Daniel Batuli, and now he's on the way out. That would open the door for Cortez Sapp to hold that spot. Cortez did take part in spring drills. Darrin Kirkland Jr. did not. He was limited from contact. Batuli also limited, but not quite as limited as Kirkland Jr. So I think Batuli was going to start in the middle, and now you've got probably Cortez Sapp. Will Ignat is another candidate to start next to Daniel Batuli, and I would say to keep an eye on Shannon Reed as well. So Darrin Kirkland Jr. now moving on from Tennessee. Some surprising news, a guy who looked to be in a position to maybe be a leader, who looked to be in a position to maybe play, and now he wants to finish his football career elsewhere. He will be eligible to play immediately. He has graduated. Obviously, Jeremy Pruitt has made it clear that he believes that if a player graduates from school, they should be granted a release to play wherever they want. He has said that, and a lot of people have suspected he said that in relation to Brandon Kennedy, the Alabama player, backup center, who's interested in transferring to Tennessee or Auburn. Nick Saban has thrown a block on that. They do not want that player to transfer within the conference or to anybody on the Crimson Tide schedule. Jeremy Pruitt came out against that, largely because of his personal experience as a transfer himself, going from MTSU to Alabama back in 1995. And you think about it, had Jeremy not been able to make that transfer, would he be the head coach at Tennessee right now? Because it was at Alabama that Jeremy played for Gene Stallings for 2 years, and then the year after that, Jeremy Pruitt got his start as a graduate assistant on the same staff as Mike Dubose, and a lot of other coaches, I might add. Woody McCorvey was on that staff, and Dabo Sweeney was on that staff. So Jeremy Pruitt really benefited from that transfer. He has very strong feelings about the transfer rule, and you will see him grant a release to Darrin Kirkland Jr. He didn't say that, but I can tell you that, from what Coach Pruitt has said about his thoughts on that, and from what Coach Fulmer also said tonight, Coach Fulmer expressing the same philosophy on transfers. If a player transfers, don't block him from going where he wants to go. That player has done his job. He's been mature. He's taken care of business in the classroom. He's earned the right to pick a school. Nick Saban, on the other hand, blocks it. No, can't happen. And you can kind of understand that because Alabama is full of five-star players. Many of their backups can start other places. And in Nick Saban's mind, they've done the work and the time to develop these players, and why should they share their wealth with others? Jeremy Pruitt said that. He said the shoe's going to be on the other foot someday when Tennessee is once again loaded and has that sort of quality depth where players are going to want to transfer out because they can't get on the field. But I believe he's going to stick to his guns, again, because of that personal experience that Jeremy has as a Middle Tennessee State transfer to Alabama for his junior and senior year. That's what enabled him to live out his dreams. Jeremy was also asked during the question and answer session about what did Coach Fulmer do to sell you on Tennessee? And Jeremy's response was he didn't have to sell him. Jeremy wanted this job. He said if anything, he was trying to sell himself to Coach Fulmer and the Vols. I thought that was very interesting and very transparent on Jeremy Pruitt's part. He was asked about the benefit of his father being a coach and what did he learn from him and what are the things that he's applying at Tennessee. And he went over some of the standard things you would expect, as far as ethics and learning to work with young people. But he said right now the biggest help to him is Phillip Fulmer. And this was something a lot of Vol fans wondered about. Could Coach Fulmer come back and be an athletic director and not, quote-unquote, interfere? Tommy Tuberville laughed at that notion. He said that Phillip Fulmer is the ideal athletic director for a head coach in training. We all wondered how Jeremy Pruitt might take that. And Jeremy Pruitt said, no, that's exactly right. Coach Fulmer is my boss. I can learn a lot from him. He knows how to succeed at Tennessee, and he also knows some things that he did that he wished he hadn't do. And one thing that I've noticed covering this Caravan the last couple weeks, whether it was in Chattanooga or Nashville or Atlanta earlier this week or Kingsport tonight, you can really see and hear Fulmer and Pruitt getting on the same track. There are conversations taking place between these men at each of these stops. Now, they talked a lot before, but Jeremy was coaching football, and Phillip Fulmer's been out taking care of a lot of other things. If you haven't noticed, this athletic department needed a lot of work. The previous administration had been a bit of a mess. And what Phillip Fulmer has done is create some stability, not just for football, but for a lot of other programs, I believe with donors, and I certainly think the fans. And I asked him about that tonight. Coach Fulmer said earlier on the Caravan that the people come out to see the coaches, that he needs to blend into the background. And yet when I went to Atlanta, the autograph line for Phillip Fulmer was longer than the autograph line for Jeremy Pruitt or Rick Barnes. And I asked him about that tonight. And his remark was, well, they'd already gotten their autographs, so that I was the last stop. And he kind of made light of it. But the fact of the matter is Tennessee football does have a legend coaching it. And that Tuberville conversation from earlier this spring, he compared Phillip Fulmer to Barry Alvarez, who's one of the most powerful and influential athletic directors in the country, to the point that he affects the college football playoff selection committee. I don't know Phillip Fulmer will ever get to that point. I don't know that he wants to. His interests are very orange. That's what he puts first. I had talked with him earlier this week about the meetings in Sandestin next week. I'll be attending those for SEC Country, covering Tennessee there, Jeremy Pruitt and Phillip Fulmer. And one thing Phillip said about that was when you sit down with the other ADs, which apparently Greg Sankey meets with the ADs once a month, they're a lot more agreeable. They're all on the same page. They have more of a sense of league harmony in mind versus the coaches, which Fulmer compared negotiating with the Russians. I assume that was a Soviet Union Cold War reference. I'm not sure that he's ever sat down with Russians before, but I thought that was kind of a humorous analogy by Coach Fulmer. One thing about him, and I said this earlier today on my appearance on Knoxville's Sports 180 with Josh Ward and Will West, with Phillip Fulmer, you're going to get what you see. I mean, seeing is believing. It's who he is. It's what he's about. Whereas other ADs, maybe without the coaching backgrounds, maybe a little bit more political, may want to test the waters a little bit more before they're willing to share opinions, before they're willing to take a stance on things. I don't sense that with Coach Fulmer. Now, he does know his place. He was asked about gambling, for example, last week, and the new rules that are going to enable some legal gambling. And he said he wanted to hear what Greg Sankey had to say about that first. So he's not going to overextend. He's not just going to throw an opinion out there about just anything. But when he does have a strong opinion, you're going to know what it is, and it's going to be his opinion. And I think that's one of his strengths. Tonight, he was asked about perhaps playing at Bristol Motor Speedway again. I'm not sure how many people realize this, but that whole idea originated from Pruitt and Smith, the owner of Speedway Motorsports, who also owns Bristol Motor Speedway as well as the Dragway up here. And back when Phillip Fulmer was winning those games and those championships, that was part of the brainchild. Was not only did you have a great university in Tennessee, but you had a championship caliber university in Tennessee. And the questions back then was, who was Tennessee going to play if there were going to be a game in Bristol? Now, the money was never right. I remember covering that story, and Doug Dickey was very adamant that the games were going to be at Neyland Stadium, that he was not going to punt a home game to play a neutral site game, what he considered a neutral site game at Bristol Motor Speedway. And he also pointed out back then that Tennessee had a home-and-home series ahead with Miami Hurricanes, and they already had an ACC team on their schedule that carried great interest. So I don't know, that might upset Virginia Tech fans to know that Coach Dickey kind of big-footed them a little bit there, saying, hey, we're already playing Miami. There's a lot of interest in that game. We don't need another ACC opponent. But that was Coach Dickey's take back then, and he didn't want to take that revenue away from Neyland Stadium and the city of Knoxville. Now, Coach Fulmer has also expressed that he really prefers home and homes, and he wants as many games as possible at Neyland Stadium because of what the revenue means to the city of Knoxville, as well as all the control and concessions Tennessee makes money off of in Neyland Stadium. He did say, though, that he would be interested in certain preseason games. Bristol was one of them. Jeremy Pruitt's stance is, if you're going to play outside of Neyland Stadium by choice, play somewhere where you recruit. Jeremy said he would be interested in a game at Bristol Motor Speedway if that's what the boss told him. He'd be willing to play there. He said you get into Virginia and the DMV, as he called it, which is the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia recruiting area. Tennessee has some players from that Tidewater, Roanoke area right now, and maybe more down the line. So interesting talk about scheduling from Phillip Fulmer, being wide open to playing at Bristol Motor Speedway again. And again, if you missed the start of the broadcast tonight, Darrin Kirkland Jr. announcing on Twitter that he plans to transfer. If you've got questions, now's a good time to ask. This is a Facebook Live session, so I can read your comments. I see Pam Epley says, if Tennessee's not for him, he knows where to go where it's best for him. Good luck, young man. Brent Phillips saying, we will be fine. Let's see what other comments we have in here. I see Josh is watching. Brad Williams. Hi, Brad. William Davenport. Donna Martin looking for the Pruitt is looking for the best. He really is. Dennis Smith says, if you quit, then you need to move on. If you are not for us, you are against us. Let's see here. Luann McCoy watching. Carolyn Ball. Any more questions from anyone about tonight's news from Kingsport, Tennessee, where Darrin Kirkland Jr. announced on Twitter that he plans to transfer from the University of Tennessee, one of the projected starting linebackers. And just to review Darrin Kirkland Jr.'s story, he played as a true freshman about 10 games. His sophomore year, some really big things were expected. Darrin is so fast. He's an NFL talent. But against Virginia Tech in that Battle of Bristol, that 45-24 win by Tennessee, which helped launch the Vols into the top 10 a couple years ago, he suffered a high ankle sprain. Darrin missed about 6 games. He came back for the South Carolina game, clearly not 100%, but the best option, because as you will remember, Jalen Reeves-Maben was also out for that season. That was a very injury-plagued year. 5 of the top 6 defensive tackles were out. Cam Sutton didn't return till near the end of the year. More questions. Kyle Bell says, why is he leaving? JJ wants to know, where do I think he'll go? I don't know where Darrin Kirkland Jr. will go. He'll be eligible to play right away. He'll be granted a release from Tennessee if he's graduated, which I'm told he has. That's Jeremy Pruitt and Phillip Fulmer's philosophy, that if a player is graduated, they will grant a release, even if it's to an in-conference school. Darrin is from Indianapolis. He was also recruited by Michigan, and he was once a commit to Michigan. I don't see him going there. Quite frankly, I have no guess. I really don't know where else he would go. Would he return to his home state to be closer to home, perhaps? Indiana? I don't know. Purdue, Notre Dame. Your guess is as good as mine. It could be Hawaii. I don't have any information on where Darrin Kirkland Jr. might go. Why is he leaving? I think Jeremy Pruitt made a veiled reference to that. If you weren't watching this Facebook Live broadcast earlier tonight, I mentioned that Jeremy was asked about leadership. Shortly after seeing that text, Zach Stipe showed Jeremy the text message prior to Jeremy going on the stage here in Kingsport. And when Jeremy was asked about leadership, he talked about some players being nervous about not getting playing time because there were so many unknowns. And then he made it very clear he doesn't care how much football they've played or where they're from or who they are. He's going to play the best. So I felt that was a veiled reference to why Darrin Kirkland Jr. was leaving, because perhaps he wasn't sure he was going to play. Obviously, the Tennessee coaches, they have not put out a depth chart yet. No one has a starting position, and so maybe Darrin got a little nervous about that and didn't want to play. Let's see who else will be taking his spot at the position. Chris Allen wants to know. Cortez Sapp took a lot of reps in there all spring, and although he was the player who quote-unquote turned down the tackle in the backfield that Jeremy was so upset about, I thought Cortez overall had a good spring, and I thought he did some good things once he returned from injury last season. So I would say Cortez Sapp would be the first candidate. I think Daniel Batuli is definitely one of the starting mics. I think Cortez could be the other. I think Will Ignat could compete for a starting position there as well. And I'm going to keep my eye on Shannon Reed. He's a really talented guy from Fort Myers, a really good athlete who's also playing in the middle. J.G. Peterson, a guy, when I was in Atlanta, I asked Jeremy Pruitt where incoming freshman J.J. Peterson will play, one of the highest rated gets for Pruitt yet, the highest rated signee. He said he could play all four of the linebacker positions. Shannon Hammonds wants to know, will Tennessee get Brandon Kennedy? Okay, so here's where that's at. While Jeremy Pruitt and Phillip Fulmer have both said that they will grant releases to players who've graduated, Nick Saban is not of that mindset, at least not within the conference. And, there is a rule that says they have to sit out a year. Now, Brandon Kennedy will probably appeal that rule. First, he must appeal to Alabama's panel, and then he would appeal to Greg Sankey. Greg Sankey treats these transfers on a case-by-case basis. The fact that Brandon Kennedy has graduated, I say, would give him a very good case. Maurice Smith went to Georgia a couple years ago, similar situation. I would say that there's a good chance that Brandon Kennedy will be granted a waiver by the Southeastern Conference. I'll be in Destin next week. I will ask Greg Sankey specifically about this rule. I know this rule will get a lot of discussion. Then it's from there, will he transfer to Auburn or Tennessee? He was recruited by both schools coming out of high school. I think that Tennessee would have an advantage for two reasons. One, I think there's a better chance for immediate playing time, starting position for Brandon Kennedy should he choose the Vols. And two, Jeremy Pruitt was on that Alabama staff, and so Brandon and Jeremy have some familiarity with one another already. Brent Phillips predicting that J.J. Peterson will play. I would agree with that. I'm not sure he's going to start. I know he's a great talent, but it takes a little while sometimes to adjust. Jeremy Pruitt certainly not averse to playing freshmen. He's made it very clear he is going to play the most talented players that he has. Let me see if there's any other questions from anyone here. Here on this Facebook Live. He was projected. Was there any indication something else was going on? Daniel, no, there wasn't. Other than the fact that Jeremy missed spring again, the fact that Darrin Kirkland Jr. missed spring again. It's always tough when you miss spring drills. When Pruitt recruits linebackers, they must be able to play outside linebacker and inside linebacker, Brent Phillips says. That's correct. And, Jeremy talked about that earlier this spring because of what happened with Alabama. They had a lot of injuries at linebacker. He wants that flexibility at the linebacker position. And so ideally they can play inside or outside linebacker. Who will be next, Ralph Harden says. Will there be other transfers? I think so. I do think there will be other transfers. I don't know who those other transfers will be, but that would make sense. It's kind of that time of year. Chip West wants to know how healthy is DK. I think he was getting healthy enough because one of the things Jeremy said repeatedly towards the end of spring was a lot of these guys would be ready if there was another week or two of spring, and I think Darrin Kirkland Jr. was one of those guys. Remember, he had the knee surgery last August after re-injuring the knee and missing the season. Roger Brooks, the health of Trey Smith and Chance Hall. I know everybody keeps asking about that. I don't expect Chance Hall to be ready for the season. He certainly wasn't in football shape this spring. He had to wait for surgery. And I don't know if you know the story of Chance Hall, but he had to wait for literally a cadaver ligament that fit his knee. Somebody big enough had to die that was an organ donor where he could get that piece to put in his knee. So his surgery was delayed a long, long time. He didn't have it till like January, I believe, and that takes some time to get back from. And I don't think that August or September is in that recovery window. And looking at Chance, I mean, he hasn't played football in a long time. He's not in football shape. I'm not sure he'll play again at Tennessee. I know he's planning to, but he's got a long way to go. He's got rehab to go. He's got to lose weight, and then he's got to be good enough. I'm not saying it's not his intent. I'm sure it is. He's a great guy. He's a great leader. When he played, when he was healthy, he was outstanding. He would have been a starter if he would have been healthy last year. But I'm just saying, when you're out of football that long and you're coming back from surgery, and with the kind of guys that Jeremy Pruitt's recruiting right now, if you're Chance Hall, at some point you look at it and go, man, you know, if not this year, do I really want to wait another year? And am I going to really have a chance, no pun intended, to play right away? The Trey Smith situation, and you know, I've talked about it a lot, and it's one of the things I don't like to talk about. And the reason that I don't like to talk about it is more humanitarian than reporter. Trey Smith is a football player, and he's a fabulous football player. He was a freshman All-American. I'm the chairman for the National Freshman All-American team, and I play a large role in selecting that team. Trey Smith was a unanimous pick, and had we had a Freshman of the Year this year in the country, he was going to be it. I think that award is going to begin next year, and I'll give you all more details on that as time goes on. There will be a new Freshman of the Year award that I'll be involved with along with the football writers. But here nor there, the award did not start last year. Had it started last year, Trey Smith would have been that guy. So on the front end, I want to tell you that I think he is a fabulous football player. He's the most impressive freshman lineman that I've ever seen. I've said, dating back to Willie Anderson, who started on the 1993 Auburn team, who went on to a great career with the Bengals. But I think Trey's even more impressive than Willie. Willie was massive and big and strong, but Trey takes it to another level with his leadership and with his character. And that, you know, you hear those words thrown around a lot from coaches and whatnot, but this kid really does get it. So many of these recruits, you know, I do these next generation shows. I know a lot of you have seen that through SEC Country here on this Tennessee Volunteers Insiders channel, those when I go into kids' homes and things like that. Not everything's on camera, obviously. Our sit-down interview is, but so many of those kids tell me that they've gotten a phone call from Trey Smith. They don't even have to be linemen. They don't even be on offense. One of the players that talks to them on campus when they're on visits, one of the players that calls them, one of the players that stays in touch with them, one of the players talking with Tanner Antonucci about his injury, one of the players that checked on him, Trey Smith. I mean, this guy is the ultimate warrior on the field, the ultimate leader off the field. And then I watched Tennessee put out the videos of them working with the underprivileged kids, and there's Trey Smith again. I mean, this guy's unbelievable. And to get to the injury news, and here's the situation. I can tell you what it's not in a roundabout way. Trey has a non-orthopedic condition, it's not bone related, that precludes him from football contact. He's in great shape. He goes to the weight room, he works out, but there's nothing that he can do for this condition. It's a medical condition that requires treatment. And the question is, will the prayers and will the medicine do the job for Trey Smith and make him healthy enough to be able to play this fall? And nobody knows that. No one knows that. The doctors would have to clear him. Tennessee is going to be very careful with this. The family is obviously going to be very careful with this. Everybody wants to see Trey Smith play. Everybody's pulling for Trey Smith. Cole Kubelik, SEC Network analyst, has said that if Trey is healthy, he would be the best returning offensive lineman in the SEC. He's a first-team All-American. I did a story today on this. Athlon Preview magazine came out, and I'm proud. One of the many things I've done as a sports writer is freelance for Athlon magazine. I've done the team previews all the way back to when I was the Alabama beat writer in the 90s, and then Tennessee, and then when I went to Michigan State, and when I came back to Tennessee. You know, I've been fortunate enough to write for Athlon Preview magazine, and those great editors there in Nashville. I'm going to tell you, those guys are great. I enjoy doing it. I get excited reading the magazine. I already know what I wrote, and I still want to see it because they do such a great job with presentation. Trey was listed as a first-team member, and how that went down was they asked me every year, you know, well, who do you nominate for first team, second team, third team? Usually I have an idea from watching the team. I might check with the coach. What do you think about this or that? In this case, I said, look, here's the deal. I don't know whether or not Trey Smith's going to play. If he plays, he's a first-team All-American. Obviously, if he doesn't play, he doesn't play. And to Athlon's credit, they said, you know what, we're going to put him first team. We're going to see the glass half full. And I think that was the right thing. Josh Phillips thought he tweeted he was cleared. No, that's not what he said. That's not what that message was intended. It's not done yet. And this is something that, again, I know everybody's anxious, but the more you talk about it, the more you tweet it, the more pressure you're putting on this kid and his family. Fans are fans. You pay your tickets. It's a free world. Everybody can say what they want. But when I started this conversation about Trey, I said this isn't something I like to talk about. And the reason that I don't like to talk about it is I feel like it puts a lot of pressure on him and puts a lot of pressure on his family. And when a guy's injured and has this sort of condition, look, if this was something where if Trey goes in and does 1 million push-ups between now and the start of the season, he'll play, that's one thing. But there is no rehab for this. There's no magic treatment for this. This is a medical condition, and his body needs to respond to it. Ben B. Castle wants to know, renovations to the south end zone and concourse is still happening. Phillip Fulmer looking very closely at those renovations at Neyland Stadium. And I asked him about that last week, and cause he'd made some comments in Memphis. And so I followed up in Nashville, and I said, hey, can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean when you say you're going to take some more time to look at the plans? And he said, well, I don't know how anybody get confused by that, Mike. He said, I'm going to take some more time. I want to look at it. He wants to review the plans, architects, planners. Coach Fulmer will do some visits to other stadiums to take a look and see what they have going for them and what things he may want to apply to Neyland Stadium. I'm sure he'll look at that budget again. Coach Fulmer, very conservative, cares a lot about Tennessee, but wants to make the right decisions. Also, keep in mind, Tennessee's going to have a new board of trustees July 1st. They're also going to get a new chancellor at some point, and I'm sure that Coach Fulmer would want those future leaders to have a voice or an idea about what's happening with Neyland Stadium. And Brent is right. Let Trey take his time and heal whatever it takes. I know that the Tennessee Vol Nation is behind him. Great kid. Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt talked quarterbacks tonight as well, said that he was going to continue to play 4 different rotations. And he said that JT Shrout, I asked him about JT Shrout tonight because he talked about Keller Christ earlier in the week in Atlanta. And he basically said that, JT and Keller have some catching up to do because Will and Jarrett have had 15 spring practices. He said that there's going to be player-led practices this summer. Obviously, he couldn't elaborate more because the players are going to lead it and he's not going to supervise it. But there's going to be a lot of work done there. And in case you missed his comments on Keller Christ earlier this week, Jeremy said that Keller Christ was going to be helpful to the team. Didn't say anything about him starting or first team. Just said that with his experience, his maturity, his leadership, that's going to have a very positive effect on the team. And that's what he said about Keller. So I thought I'd follow up and ask about JT Shrout tonight. And Coach Pruitt said he's got a big arm. He thinks a lot of the kid, but he thinks that he's probably a little bit further behind, obviously, as he makes the transformation from high school to college. So the news out on Darrin Kirkland Jr. that he will be transferring from Tennessee. Henry Little says, I live in Johnson City. Where exactly was the Caravan? It was over here in Kingsport at the Marriott Meadowview out on a very picturesque, pleasant night here in Kingsport, Tennessee. Beautiful night, really. Wonderful state, great place to live, as we all know. Anyone have any more questions, feel free to ask. I'm about to close this podcast down. I've got a couple stories posted on seccountry.com if you want to find them on Twitter, at Mike Griffith 32. If you go to at Mike Griffith 32, you'll see a link to several stories today about Trey Smith, about Phillip Fulmer talking about perhaps playing at Bristol, about Darrin Kirkland Jr. announcing his transfer, and about Jeremy Pruitt, maybe with a veiled reference to Darrin Kirkland Jr. saying some guys are afraid they're not going to play, nervous about it. So I'm going to close it down from here. I certainly appreciate y'all watching tonight. Shy Tuttle is healthy. Yes, he took part in the orange and white game. This is his first healthy off season, and throw Kyle Phillips in that mix as well, as Kyle is having a healthy offseason for the first time as well. Running back situation, has the new running back started to practice yet? Madre London, no, but I did have an opportunity to talk with Madre up in Michigan last month. I went up there and did one of those videos. In fact, if you're on the Tennessee Volunteers Insiders page and you look through the video section, you'll see me talking with Madre London. We talked for about an hour. I'll warn you, a lot of it's about his career at Michigan State. There were some Tennessee fans on there that got kind of ugly and upset and said, stop talking about Michigan State. And I basically said, look, the guy isn't even shown up in Tennessee yet, and Madre is sitting here, and this is what we're going to talk about so you can know who he is and what he's done. And there's really not much he can say about Tennessee till he gets here. Madre does know he's going to be in a platoon situation. He does know that Coach Pruitt wants him to run between the tackles, and he's one of those mature guys that I think Coach Pruitt's looking for to provide some leadership, along with Ty Chandler, who will be competing for the starting job, and obviously Timmy Jordan had that great orange and white game. Don't know much about the Clemson quarterback. I saw the question on there. I'm sorry, I don't know if he's a player for Tennessee in terms of would he want to transfer here. Lewis Monroe says thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all the support. I'm going to continue to do some Facebook Lives for you. I'll be down in Destin, Florida next week. In addition to coming on here on the Tennessee Volunteers channel next week to tell you what Phillip Fulmer and Jeremy Pruitt say in Destin, I'll be appearing on Dog Nation as well. The Georgia website. I'll be doing some stuff with Kirby Smart. Obviously, I'll try and chase down Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher and Kirby to talk to them about Jeremy, and I'll be doing some stuff on those schools as well while I'm down there. So everyone, have a tremendous night, a safe weekend, and I'll be back on here next week once again to do more of these Facebook Lives, and keep the questions coming. If you have more questions, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. Just tweet at me at MikeGriffith32. And I'll get back with you as soon as I can, or you can leave the questions there. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you later.